always sort of been one of these guys that was a rah-rah, emotional, inspirational kind of a guy to get the team ready to play. And there's probably one really memorable game that sort of almost changed the whole dynamics of the psychological approach that we use to motivate teams. And it happened when we played Ohio State in 1998. And they had been number one all the way through. We were 4-5, not a very good team, and we won that game. And we decided to use the approach that we were not going to focus on the outcome, that we were just going to focus on the process of what it took to play the best football you could play, which was to focus on that particular play like it had a history and a life of its own. Don't look at the scoreboard. Don't look at any other external factors. Just all your focus, all your concentration, all your effort, all your toughness, all your discipline to execute went into that particular play. And regardless of what happened on that play, success or failure, you would move on to the next play and have the same focus to do that on the next play. And that you would do that for 60 minutes in the game. And then you would be able to live with the results regardless of what those results were.
Rising fight, victory finish you.
Hey guys, that's a great win. It's a tremendous job by everybody on this football team getting ready for the game, preparing well, staying focused, not getting caught up, and going out and executing, doing a tremendous job on offense. Defense played great for a long time, lost a little bit in the end. Everybody did a great job, guys.
If you look at our record from that time on, since we sort of changed our approach. This is the end of the 98 season. 99 was a pretty good year. LSU, we had some pretty good years. And so I think that I've convinced myself through the years that the process-oriented approach is much, much better. And it's much better for competitors because it keeps them focusing on the right things, not the results, but what it takes to get the results.
Flutie flushed, throws it down, caught by Boston College. I don't believe it. It's a touchdown.
It's up. Just up to the right. Lets it go. He's got three people down there. The ball's up in the air. Caught. Touchdown.
All right, welcome everybody to the College Football Retro Show. I'm your host, Dan Murphy, along with my co-host, Brian Barnes. And Brian, we just heard the cold open there. Nick Saban, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, talking about the 1998 Michigan State-Ohio State game. Michigan State went into that game a 28-point underdog, and ended up being one of Nick Saban's greatest accomplishments, or really kind of kicked off his coaching career there.
It was, and it was really neat how he talked about, the mindset of his team going into that game and how they changed that mindset and made it more, as he talked about, the process based instead of being outcome based, and the importance of that. And obviously it pulled off in this game, and it was one of those games nobody expected. I remember where I was watching this game, and they were a 28-point underdog in this game at number one Ohio State, and Ohio State was going through a period of time in the early to mid 90s where those guys were loaded, had some really good football teams, and to say it was a surprise upset win would be an understatement.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember as a Michigan fan thinking like, and I'm sure Ohio State fans were thinking the same way, like, oh, we're just building up to the Michigan-Ohio State game. Like Michigan had beaten Ohio State 3 years in a row, ruined Ohio State's chances for national championships those seasons. And you're thinking Ohio State, the big hurdle that they had left was going to be Michigan. And then here comes another team from the state of Michigan coming down, Michigan State. No one thought they could win. No one thought they would compete. And obviously, as a 28-point underdog, but man, Nick Saban had those guys ready to go.
I mean, you're right. And you look at the rest of Ohio State's schedule that year, even the Michigan game, there weren't a lot of close contests.
Yeah.
Ohio State was blowing everybody out. And it just goes to show you how hard it is to go undefeated in college football. And, we talked about our feelings about the college football playoff and how games were back then. But a lot of those Ohio State teams in the early to mid 90s, like they could have easily gone on a run, just like the 2024 team did, but they weren't given that chance, and which is just wild to think about. But that's just the way things were there. And again, though, it made regular season college football extremely important and extremely special, and made all those games great to watch.
And another interesting thing was that Ohio State went into this ranked number two. I think they might have been number one in one of the polls. One of the polls they were number two, but obviously right there. And this is the first year of the BCS championship game, following the '97 season where Michigan and Nebraska shared the national championship. This was the first year, so this was kind of new. Ohio State wasn't going in. Yeah, we want to get to the Rose Bowl. They actually wanted to get to the Fiesta Bowl because that was going to be the BCS championship game. But obviously, as we'll get into it, Michigan State ruined that for Ohio State.
Yeah, and it's funny they had a claim to play in that national title game because I want to say Florida State. I want to say I could be wrong, but I think Thad Busby was their starting quarterback at Florida State for that national title game, and he was he was a backup quarterback, and they were a one-loss team as well, and won the ACC. But the Big Ten is better than the ACC, so Ohio State had a claim then as well. But you're right.
You lose as a 28-point favorite at home. It's tough back
That's
then,
true.
and something like that late in the year, it's tough.
Perception was so much in college football when it came to voting, and you got punished a lot for winning games ugly. And there's something to be said for, being a team and a program that can win games ugly. It says a lot about your mettle and your mental toughness. But you're right. I mean, it looks bad all around when it's not their fault they were a 28-point favorite, but they were definitely the better team and came up short.
Yep. So, Brian, I'll let you go ahead. We'll get into these rosters and the coaching staffs for both teams.
Yeah, so I'll start it off with the Michigan State team, and Nick Saban, this was his fourth season at Michigan State, and the previous 3 years ended in bowl game losses, and they weren't really close. And it's funny going into his fourth season with that kind of record. I don't think nowadays he would have lasted much longer. And there was a lot of criticism on him. But early on in the season that year, Michigan State started at home. They started the season ranked 23rd. They lost at home to Colorado State and then went out to Oregon before Oregon became really Oregon. But Oregon was still a good football team, and they got destroyed. And they came back to host Notre Dame on a Saturday night college football game, and it was an emotional game because Amp Campbell was a defender for Michigan State, and he got hurt and was out for the season and hurt his neck. And so, it just goes to show you the emotion of college football and what it can do to you. And I was at that game, and I remember watching that game in person. It was just wild. And Michigan State smoked Notre Dame, who was ranked 10 at the time, 45 to 23. And they had a letdown next week against Michigan. And we're kind of back and forth and not very consistent all season going into this game. But, if you look at Michigan State's roster and their coaching staff, they were a very talented team. So they have future NFL players, Plaxico Burress, obviously was a Super Bowl hero for the Giants. Robert Smith played in the NFL for the Titans. Julian Peterson, who was a Pro Bowl player for the 49ers. Eric Morris ended up playing for the Tennessee Titans and actually has local ties he's from Berkeley, played at Berkeley High School. So, Michigan State had some talented guys, even though their record wasn't, great at the time. And one name that everybody will definitely know as a Lions fan is Paul Edinger. So Paul Edinger is the reason the Matt Millen era happened for the Lions because his last second kick for the Bears beat the Lions at the last game of the regular season, and the Lions missed the playoffs because of it. And so he was on that team as well. And so their coaching staff, besides Nick Saban, some names that people would know right now. Mark D'Antonio was on that staff. Brian Daboll was on that staff. He's currently the head coach of the Giants, and Bill Sheridan was on that staff. And the other crazy thing, really quick, about Nick Saban is that he wasn't even at the top of the list of coaches that Michigan State wanted to hire. Gary Blackney was a head coach and had some success at Bowling Green, and Fran Gantner was at Penn State, and some of those good Penn State teams with Kajana Carter and Kerry Collins and them. So he ironically wasn't even the first choice, and he was with the Cleveland Browns at the time, and then they hired him, and obviously it worked out. But you know, transferring over then to Ohio State, like again, they went on a run in 93, 95, and 96 where they lost to their only regular season loss was to the team up north, Michigan. And it ruined potentially a national championship season. And 97, they finished 10-3. That was obviously the year Michigan won the national title. But Ohio State, again, back to 98, they weren't as loaded as some of those other teams. Those other teams had Big Daddy Wilkinson, who was a #1 pick by the Bengals, Terry Glenn, Eddie George, Orlando Pace, all amazing football players who had great NFL careers, but they were still pretty loaded. They had good players. David Boston was their best receiver. Jonathan Wells had some run in the NFL as a running back. Andy Katzenmoyer, who was a really good college football player, was a middle linebacker, and their quarterback was Joe Germain. And there was no other game on the schedule for Ohio State that year that was really close. That's the crazy thing. And so all those years they couldn't beat Michigan. They couldn't finish it off and beat another school from the state of Michigan, and lost to Michigan State this year. And John Cooper, this was an interesting era. Then Ohio State's head coach, he finished 2-10-1 against Michigan. And if that record is even 500, he might have a few national championships to say, with his time at Ohio State. But again, Ohio State was loaded this year. Like I said, they ended up finishing tied for first in the Big Ten. They finished in a tie with Wisconsin. They were both 11-1, 7-1 in the league. But Ohio State was pretty dominant. They ended up winning the Sugar Bowl that year over number 8 Texas A&M, and Michigan State didn't go to a bowl game. So again, good reasoning why they were a 28-point favorite going into this game. And it just, again, it goes to show you never know with college kids, and you never know how the game's going to transpire. And obviously when we were watching the show, or we were going to watch the game clip, we'll see that comes to fruition.
Yeah. Just interesting with John Cooper. You think about if they had the playoff system that we have now, because Ryan Day went through very similar what John Cooper went through with his losses to Michigan, losing 4 straight to Michigan most recently. But because of the expanded playoffs, he goes into the playoff and they make a run, they win the national title. So you think about what John Cooper's legacy could have been if he had been playing in his current day with the current system. Maybe that Ohio State team, because that Ohio State team, a lot of those teams were loaded and were probably 1 or 2 of the best teams in the country. But they just had, a slip up here, a slip up there, many slip ups to Michigan, obviously. But if they had this playoff system they had now, who knows how many national championships they could have won.
And who's to say, there was some truth to this, as much as we, don't love the current, playoff system. Like there were a lot of teams that weren't very healthy toward the end of the regular season that maybe lost some games, not just Ohio State, just in college football in general, right? Who theoretically got healthy before a bowl game, right? And then in some instances, like Ohio State this year in college football, like they got some pieces back for their playoff run that they didn't have at the end of the regular season. And that happens. And that happened to a lot of teams who weren't healthy, but maybe had a bad loss earlier in the year because they weren't healthy, or they were a young football team, and then toward the end of the year, they were playing as good as anybody in the country. But yeah, no doubt about it. Ohio State, they would have, hosted a couple playoff games, back then, and they probably could have gone on a run as well.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get right into it here. This is the 1998 Michigan State Ohio State game, and you're gonna start off. You're gonna hear Brent Musburger kind of intro and lead us into Ohio State's first drive.
The results.
You are looking live at Ohio Stadium in Columbus, Ohio. The November weather is starting to change, but the red-hot Buckeyes are a 4-touchdown favorite over Michigan State. Getting a 300-yard gain. Wiley goes in motion to the short side, and they run the fullback Keller to the 31-yard line. Command Cedric Henry. And Coach Saban hopes to use him a lot today. He likes the nickel defense. Jermaine's first pass is complete to Boston. Flanker screen.
David Boston getting the ball in his hands early.
Here's Jermaine on a play fake. Wiley going far side high. D. Miller in the air. Coming off his career game.
Another big play for D. Miller.
Flair Wiley. Beautiful in the flat. Wiley first down, runs free. 15, 10, and bumped out.
Ohio State just marching right down the field right at the bat here, Brian.
Keller and Wiley.
Yeah, and you know, I mentioned there wasn't a lot of guys from this team that were NFL stars, but like, gosh, they're really good football. They're still great college football players. You know, it doesn't always correlate being a great college football player to being a great NFL player, but they still had really good football players.
Yeah, so Ohio State gets, I mean, they drive down the field, get a, goal to go situation, but Michigan State gets a goal line stop here and forces Ohio State to kick a field goal. So a little bit of, maybe Ohio State could have gone for it, but they decided to get the 3 points here right off the bat.
Brent Bartholomew is the holder. He'll put it down at the 10-yard line from the right hash. Chips it through. Puts the Buckeyes
So Ohio State takes the early 3-0 lead.
Change. Nate Clemens checks in. 3 wideouts. Haygood checks in. And they use the inside shuffle. And here comes Cedric Irvin.
So Cedric Irvin kind of underrated, Michigan State running back of the past. He would have a big game here.
Yeah, he didn't have breakaway speed necessarily, and he was my favorite player, actually. He was my age, and I really liked watching him play. But his first game as a collegiate athlete, he had 4 touchdowns. I remember watching that, and so he had some talent.
So we see Plaxico Burress. He would just have a huge game.
Shotgun look. Buckeyes show pressure. Trying to get at Burke. Fires high and
incomplete. So an incomplete pass there on 3rd down. Forces Michigan State to kick a field goal. But a good drive, good opening drive for Michigan State, following Ohio State's drive to get a field goal, to answer that field goal right back. So we got 3 of 3 here to begin.
Jermaine with the run look and off the play action to Boston for the first down.
Dan, a little nostalgia again watching this game. Like, I used to love watching Ohio State play with the tracker on the field. For some reason, I thought that was a neat part of their personality.
Is averaging 108 yards a game, and he's already rushed for 31 on 3 carries. Blocking this time middle.
We get a broken coverage here for Michigan State to hit the tight end right down the middle of the field.
41 yards, and the tight end puts the Buckeyes back.
Yeah, he was a good tight end for them, and then Ricky Dudley was also during this era. It was at Ohio State tight end who played for the Raiders and was a good NFL.
For Ohio State's first touchdown.
So pretty back and forth here to start the game. Ohio State's up 10-3 now. Burress, another big play. Just can't break away though.
And brings him down at the 36 and 7.
3rd down here.
From the pocket middle, Burress couldn't make the diving reception.
So incomplete. So Brian, you get a situation here. You kind of in no man's land. I always call it the 35-yard line, especially in college football. You're too close. You don't want to punt. It's a little bit long to go for it, but it's a little bit too far to kick a field goal. So always a tough situation when you get in these points of the game.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I've mentioned it before. Those are conversations coaches have ahead of time too, I think, and like the situations like, hey, we're going in, we're the visiting team and we're 28-point underdog against the #1 team in the country. Like, we're gonna, be aggressive and, take our shots and go for it when we think we can.
So Michigan State's going to decide to go for it here. 4th down. They're at the 35-yard line, Ohio State.
And Burke, under pressure, fires
and an incomplete pass. So they're going to turn the ball over on downs. So following that play, we'd get a couple of punts back and forth. But Michigan State will get the ball back here. We got about 2 minutes left in the first quarter.
10-3. First down. Burke, the left-hander, hit fumble. And the Buckeyes pounce on it. Ohio State ball, first down. It was Antoine Winfield on a corner blitz.
So you get Antoine Winfield with the big blitz there, forcing the fumble on Burke. Just a big game changer right there to get the ball in Michigan State territory.
Yeah, he's the name I should have mentioned earlier. He ended up playing in the NFL, and he was a really good defensive back.
Yeah, just fantastic player. So I guess it gives Ohio State, they get a few run plays. They get down to into Michigan State's territory here inside the 10.
And here is Wiley
over. We get Wiley over the top. So Ohio State gets Goes up 14 here, 17-3 in the first quarter.
Straight back.
And this is a pretty important drive for Michigan State. Like if they go 3 and out, or they don't get field position,
In trouble.
it could easily become a 24-3 game.
Intercepted.
So what's going to happen here? You get the we're just going to call it here.
This is what I think it is.
Roughing the quarterback. So, like you said, Brian, that's a huge drive here. If they get stopped and have to punt, you're down 14. You kind of feel like Ohio State might kind of run away with it, or at least have a chance to run away with it. But you get a huge penalty here, and this would be kind of a story of the game. It's just mistakes and self-inflicted mistakes by Ohio State that would keep Michigan State in this game.
Against the Buckeyes, and the Buckeyes have been rotating more and more defensive.
And Dan, this as a coach and as a player, you never want to keep an underdog around to let them think they have a chance to win.
Yeah.
Got it, but no.
So following the roughing the quarterback, Michigan State comes back with a little trickery play. Not a huge gain, but because it gives them a positive play here.
Make those tackles. Leroy McFadden in for the first time, and the receiver down, and it is incomplete. 4th and 2.
So Michigan State does get stopped. First, a long field goal for Edinger. Right down the middle there. So that would be a story of this game as well, as Edinger, who, like you talked about, would be a future NFL kicker, but he would nail 5 field goals in this game and be a huge factor.
Anytime you end a drive with a kick, that's what all offensive coaches want, some form of a kick, and huge part of this game.
It's an opera. They're waiting for Michigan in 2 weeks, obviously. Jermaine hit for the backside fumble, and the Spartans go for it and got it at the 28-yard line. Michigan State recovers on the turnover.
So following the Michigan State field goal drive, you get a big turnover here for Michigan State's defense, creating the fumble. And again, turnovers and penalties would be a huge story of Ohio State's game.
You go back to that roughing the passer. Ohio State gets a stop and goes scores. It's 24-3, and you could argue that's not something Michigan State's coming back from.
Third and goal. They force kick a field goal, but again, you get points. Like you say, you end the drive with a kick, and you're going to cut the game to a 1-score game here.
You're Ohio State and John Cooper and their coaching staff. Like, they're telling their guys, like, we haven't played a perfect half at all, and we've held them to 3 field goals. So they've got to be feeling, they got to be feeling okay as well.
Yeah. So they pretty much the rest of the second quarter would just be defensive stops, a lot of punts. Really a defensive battle through the end of the half. So Michigan State would end the half, down 17-9, but you got to be feeling pretty good. After going down 17-3, you got to be being a little bit worried, but they bounced back, and especially defensively, were able to hold Ohio State down, create a couple turnovers, and get themselves into this game. And you got a 1-score game going into halftime.
For sure, things have settled down a little bit, and they struggled to stop Ohio State, but. Yeah, like you said, if you're their coaching staff, you're like, hey, that's the best they got, and we're down 8. And we're okay.
And Nick Saban will take his Spartans into the locker room.
So the teams would exchange punts again. To start the second half. This is going to be Michigan State's second drive of the half.
Swing. Irvin, good receiver, runs for the flag, got the first down, and then some.
Positive path, field position for my trick plays.
Steps up on the blitz, middle complete. Put it into Gary Scott's hands.
A lot of these guys from Michigan State, are returning the following season.
So Michigan State's got a pretty good drive going here, Brian. They got a chance to, at least, even if they can get a field goal, cut it to 5 points, but even possibly score a touchdown and make it a tie game, 17-17. But unfortunately for Michigan State, they're going to make a huge mistake here.
For a fresh set of downs. Quick snaps to the middle, picked off, intercepted, touchdown Buckeyes, Damon Moore, they won't get close.
So, Brian, just an absolute gut punch to Michigan State. Like I said, you're driving, you're thinking maybe you got a chance to tie the game, and in a blink of an eye, you get a pick 6, and now you're down 2 scores again.
Yeah, and they hadn't really made that big mistake yet. And That's why in football it's so important. They talk about, how do quarterbacks perform when pressured and when blitzed, and a lot of times if they're not on the same page with their receiver, with their hot route or their pass protection, quarterbacks might force stuff at times when in their mind or from a coach's perspective, hey, it's better off just to take a sack. But players are, players and competitors for a reason. I think they can make plays, but uh yeah, and right now at this score, it's about to be 20, 24-9. You're Michigan State, like it could have gone either way. Like they hadn't had a ton of, like I mentioned before, the previous 3 years, a ton of success, right? They were middle of the pack. So what type of resolve are they going to have right here? Are they just going to say, all right, we're done. We're not as good as these guys, or they keep fighting, or are they going to keep fighting back?
4 touchdowns.
So following that, Michigan State goes 3 and out, but they get a big break here.
In the jersey, it hit a Spartan. Michigan State recovered it. They'll sort it all out. And they've got it. It did hit a Buckeye.
So absolutely huge for Michigan State, obviously. You go 3 and out after the pick six. You got to punt the ball. Ohio State's going to have the ball in good territory with 15-point lead, but they fumble the punt.
Can't can't let an underdog hang around and think they have a chance.
Yeah.
And you could argue that Ohio State right there, if they get the ball right there, they're going to put them away and it's over. But again, it's a game played by humans and it's hard and these things happen and it's also a situation on Ohio State's defensive guys. Hey, like we got to step up there and make a play,
Yeah.
and they didn't.
Yeah, for sure. But just again, going back to the first half, Ohio State, these self-inflicted wounds, the roughing the passer that kept a Michigan State drive going, the fumble that they had, man, just all these mistakes that they made. I mean, and if you're, if you're 28-point favorite, that's how these things happen. That's how these upset happen. If you make mistakes and allow them to hang around, allow them to stay in the game, that's how these things happen.
That's why, again, like there's so many great teams that didn't finish undefeated in college football because it's so hard to do. Like you're 18 to 22-year-olds,
Yeah.
you expect you to be perfect every week. It's so hard to do.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They roll the pocket to the left. Got the
So
first
this is a
down.
big third down pickup that Michigan State got, getting down to Ohio State's 20.
Burt fires over Plummer. Dives. LaBelle's got it in the corner. And touchdown, Michigan.
And I
With
remember
the touchdown.
watching this game thinking like that was a drive like Michigan State needed a touchdown. And it wouldn't have necessarily, not that it would have been insurmountable if they would have kicked another field goal right there, but I just felt like, they need to break through. Like they've got a great break. They need to score a touchdown.
So yeah, absolutely. And they get the touchdown there, but then Ettinger, who makes 5 field goals in the game, misses this extra point. So instead of it being an 8-point game, it's a 9-point game, and it's still a 2-score game.
Kick 40-yard field goals. Miss extra points. What could happen here? But instead of being down 8, they're down 9. Here's Wiley. Jogs and hit from behind. And that shows you the kind of defense.
And again, Ohio State turns the ball over.
There it is. What a great defensive performance by Michigan State here this afternoon. 49-yard.
So Michigan State would actually go 3 and out following the turnover, but Ettinger comes back on the field, a 49-yard field goal after missing the extra point just a few minutes earlier.
And it's good.
Cut the lead to 6 now.
Miss an extra point. Kick a 49-yard field goal. Why not?
So how about that, Brian? Ettinger misses the extra point. Obviously, he made some field goals earlier in the game, but you miss an extra point, and it's only been a few minutes, really real time, since he was on the field and missed that extra point, and now you're going to ask him to go out there and kick a 49-yarder. I mean, is there any thought of like, maybe we should go for it, or
Yeah, I mean, he was a pretty good kicker all year, and like we mentioned earlier, he ended up kicking in the pros. So I mean, you got to trust your guys.
Yeah.
Like he's your guy, and that's one little hiccup. You still trust him. Like you still got to coach the game and play. If that's your strategy, play that strategy. Let the guy kick. So it might be different if he was a 50-50 kicker all year.
Yeah.
But he was a pretty good kicker.
Yeah, for sure.
Yards to go for the Bucks.
Ohio State's falling drive here, third down, and just a terrible pass. I don't know if it was a misread or a miscommunication on a route. But Ohio State, ends up giving the ball back to Michigan State, and Michigan State gets another stop. Their defense, I mean, just absolutely stepped up. After that pick six, Michigan State's defense would step up really the rest of this game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, Plaxico Burress again. There you go, 4 catches, 124 yards. You just throw it up to him and he goes gets it.
Couldn't find anybody open. Runs hard to the left. Throws back, middle's open. Tight end. And it is Baker to the 11-yard line. I'm in an open spot. Ball on the 12. First down. Cedric Irvin runs for the corner, and he's cut off by Moore. Beautifully.
Michigan State just driving right down on him. Big play after big play. You can see it. Nick Saban's, he's fired up. So you go to the end of the third quarter here. We're going into the fourth, and Michigan State's got the ball inside the 10-yard line. Man, you got to be thinking like Ohio State fans got to be going crazy right now. Like, oh my God, can we actually lose this football game?
Yeah. And, what happens is when you're a big favorite, your coaches don't tell you this, but you expect to win by a lot, and the fans expect to win by a lot. And when that doesn't happen, you start to get a little anxiety, as a fan base and probably as a player a little bit, because if you're thinking, man, we got to blow these guys out, we're going to blow them out, and you're not, especially into the fourth quarter, and doubt seeps in a little bit, like, man, that's a problem. And there are teams that have been in that situation a lot. And same thing on the other side. If you're going in there thinking like if we keep it close going into the fourth quarter, we're going to have a shot. And not only like keeping it close, but Michigan State, literally, they're inside the 10-yard line going into the fourth quarter. So both of those happen for certain, and more so the fans. But yeah, they've got to be thinking like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah. And you got to imagine the players for Ohio State, they start pressing a little bit and start maybe doing a little bit more, trying to do more than what they're capable of doing. And that's where mistakes can happen, penalties can happen, turnovers can happen, as we've seen throughout this game.
For sure.
Fourth quarter is here. Back after this message and a word from our ABC stations.
The jump ball is going to be 3rd and 1 here. Michigan State trying to go in with the go-ahead score. Irvin powers his way in. Well, they tie it, so Edinger does have to come out and make an extra point, which obviously wasn't automatic considering he had missed one earlier. But you can see, kind of Ohio State, man, they're kind of looking at each other like, man, what is going on here? There you go. Edinger hits the extra point, and now Michigan State has the lead for the first time in the game.
92 yards.
25-24. So you still got a whole fourth quarter left to go here, though. So it's not like it's, dire right now for Ohio State. They still got a ton of time.
The press formation. Here's the blitz. Canoes coming, drop middle, incomplete.
Yeah, just can't connect. But you get a pass interference. They call it uncatchable. So that's a big call there, right, Brian? I mean, Ohio State could have had a good drive going. They would have put them around midfield, but referees convene and say that it was uncatchable.
It is, and again, you notice the impact when you pressure a quarterback. They don't like pressure. When they can't stand in the pocket and just do their thing, it's a problem for them.
Yeah.
Comes off Plaxico. Looks underneath. Scott.
Michigan State, they couldn't capitalize. They end up going 3 and out. Now you got Ohio State coming down the field here. And again, Julian Peterson, I mean, just what an impact he had made on this football game. Causing the turnover on Jermaine. And again, but Jermaine, tuck the ball away and take the sack.
Sure.
I mean, just crucial mistakes by Ohio State again.
Peterson again, just a little bit closer. Plenty of time. First to the middle. Fires diving incomplete.
Michigan State will fail on 3rd down here and be forced to kick the field goal.
2-yard attempt. Right down the middle.
Nails it. We're up 28-24. So Edinger, 5th field goal of the game.
And that ties his own school record for the Bucks.
We got about 10 minutes left. A little bit over 9 minutes left. Ohio State down 4.
Go on and finish his career as a national champ. Coming back and pounding into the secondary again.
After Jermaine was kind of struggling a little bit, Brian, they go to the running game and try to pound the ball here.
Smart. They did that, most of the first drive and most of the first quarter. And back then, especially, that's similar to Michigan at Michigan State. Then that's who Ohio State was. Really good running backs.
We got a 3rd and 3s, but time's ticking down. That's the one thing about this drive. So you've killed almost 6 minutes off the clock. Now you had a great drive, but now you get down to a 4th and 1, and because you wore out so much time, they're almost like what we call a 4-minute offense, even though they were down, right? 4-minute offense. You try to run the ball and run as much clock as you can. So from a Michigan State standpoint, man, you're thinking, wow, yeah, they're driving, but man, if we get a stop, they've clicked off a ton of time. So this is a huge 4th and 1 situation here. Ohio State really needs to pick this up.
Nothing fancy. Smash mouth for the Bucks. Montgomery stood up in the hole. Did not get
Stuffed.
Turner led the assault. Michigan State.
So man, now you got to Ohio State's really got the pressure on them now. They got to get a stop on Michigan State's offense. I mean, their national championship hopes are hanging the balance at this point. We got a 2nd and long, a big completion for Michigan State here. Michigan State would get a couple run plays to run some more clock, force Ohio State to use some timeouts. Now we got a 3rd and 5 here. So we get stuffed. Ohio State gets the stop, but because of their previous offensive drive where they used so much time, and then Michigan State picking up that big 1st down on that 2nd and long, forces Ohio State to use their timeouts.
And I'm sure there were some people probably thinking, with that call right there, Michigan State, hey, put it in the air, but their defense has played really well the second half. They're content with, punting right there and playing defense.
Yeah. Because I think the goal of Michigan State on that drive was to use some time and force Ohio State to use their timeouts. Like if nothing else, let's make sure that if they get the ball back, they're not gonna have any timeouts.
No doubt.
And they at least accomplish that. Now, like you said, you could argue maybe they could put it up in the air on that third down, but if it's an incomplete pass, Ohio State saves a timeout. So you force them to use their last timeout there.
Keep in mind, Nick Saban's a defensive-minded head coach, and there he goes.
But unfortunately, they get kind of a short punt here, line drive. We got Boston getting a pretty good return here down the midfield. Boston again crossing around here. So you got a minute and a half. Ohio State's at around the 35-yard line. And again, I mean, this is it right now. They don't have timeouts. You got a minute 35. They're down 4. They got to get the ball in the end zone, or their chance at a national championship is gone. So everything on the line here in this final drive for Ohio State.
Well, to reiterate what you just said too, Dan, the national championship hopes are gone. Simply by
it's crazy.
And you notice two good completions right there, and Michigan State not bringing a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Looks right, goes high, Boston off his hands, incomplete. Ohio State neat.
So they changed it up a little bit here. So this is going to be the final series here. You started off, Michigan State pretty much brings pressure on every single play here.
It's a touchdown. Down by 4. 1:25 to go. 2nd and 10.
So they're almost a full-out blitz. Force them to get rid of it quick.
Yeah, for Michigan State, I'm thinking if they're going to beat us, then Joe Germain's going to have to make that dude beat us.
Again, 3rd down. So now we got 4th down. This is it here. It's 4th and 10. They can get a 1st down at the 5-yard line. But you can go to the end zone as well here too, but you can get a 1st down without scoring a touchdown. But this is it. I mean, this is 4th and 10, everything on the line here. And again, if you're thinking, Michigan State's already pressure 3 times, I mean, you gonna do it again?
Yeah, you definitely have to. Right?
Force them to get rid of it.
That's how you're going out. Yep. One way or another, that's how you're going out.
And if I'm Ohio State, man, I got to be thinking, I got to get the ball in Boston's hands.
But
if I got him one-on-one, I mean.
Well, Dan, and what's crazy, though? Think about the difference in college football in 1998 compared to now. So Ohio State, it has 2 backs in the backfield. They're under center, and they have a tight end. And Michigan State brings 8, and they're still under pressure. Like that, it was just a different game.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point with what their formation. This is 4th and 10.
Yeah,
It's 4th and 10.
right.
And this is the formation they're in.
You're
Just
in
wild.
like the personnel grouping, like back in the day when there was a lot more personnel groupings, like this is a base first down personnel grouping, two
Yeah.
backs, one tight end.
Yeah.
Just wild.
Yeah. Crazy.
Fourth down. And Jermaine takes it deep, throws Miller, intercepted. Hill's got it. Ronaldo Hill.
It literally was a two-man route and just find the best matchup. There isn't a read. Expect your receiver to beat that corner who's also coached up in
Yeah.
scholarship, you know.
Coached up by Nick Saban,
Yeah.
who ends up being the greatest coaches of all time, and especially his pride and joy is coaching defensive backs. So I just kind of want to go back to this play one more time, Brian. This 4th down here. And like you said, they got two backs in the backfield and they stay in to pick up the pressure.
Yeah. So does
And
the
they
tight end.
do a pretty good job.
So does the
Like,
tight
I
end.
think if Jermaine kind of steps into this throw, I mean, I think he's got a shot here. He got one-on-one coverage, but he kind of just throws it off his back foot, kind of
There is
lofts it
some
up there.
Yeah, and
Oh, sorry.
there is some truth to it though. When you've been pressured a lot, you start hearing footsteps, or maybe they're closer than you think. And I mean, even if he makes a great throw, they called a corner route, against a cornerback who's playing off already. Like that's not a real high percentage thing, unless that receiver was like a Plaxico Burress or somebody that can go over the top and moss a defender, but. Um, yeah, just one of those losses. Whereas you're Ohio State, like
Yeah.
you're like, oh my, like
There,
everything was set up for him that year.
yeah.
Everything was set up for him that year. No other
Yeah,
game was
and
close.
even like I just keep going back to that last play. Like even when I try to get him rolled out, give him a better opportunity. If you feel like he keep getting pressure inside, maybe have him roll out, give him a little bit better of an opportunity. But man, just wild, wild. Again, you really brought it up though, that formation that you would just never see that
Nope,
on a 4th and 10 with everything on the line to have two backs in the backfield like that.
nope.
And
Right?
there neither one goes out for a route. Just wild. But man, that's one of the great upsets really in college football history. A 28-point underdog going into Columbus, Ohio State having a chance to, their national championship, on the line there basically. And man, Michigan State gets the job done. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and looking back at it as a Michigan State fan, you kind of felt that Michigan State was at the precipice of turning the corner, and they were really close to taking that next step. And they didn't do it the rest of that season. Really, they didn't do it until the following season. But you could kind of tell that like that was a big deal at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously that would carry through to the next season in '99 where they would have a great season, beating Michigan and going to, was it Citrus Bowl, right?
They did go to the Citrus
Citrus
Bowl
Bowl.
and they beat Florida.
Um,
Yep.
yeah. So just one of the classics, one of the great Michigan State wins in their, storied history. So, but this would lead to Nick Saban. Actually, we talked about the '99 season. He would have a great year in '99, but he would take the job and go to LSU.
He did, and gosh, there's so many. Like, I think this is gonna be the nerdy fan in me. There's so many what if scenarios in college football with coaches taking certain jobs and coaches, are they going to this school? Are they not going to this school? And he had second thoughts about going to LSU. And they talked about how he turned the plane around at one point, or he left the plane for his coaches to, hey, if you want to come with me, and none of them came, and just stuff like that. But Michigan State fans wonder what if Nick Saban would have stayed at Michigan State, what would have happened? And didn't turn out that way though. But it's fun to reminisce and wonder.
Yeah. And obviously, we know what Nick Saban will go on to do, but it's fascinating to think, we talk a little bit about Nick Saban and his career. Obviously, you go on to LSU, you win a national championship, but then go to the NFL and go to the Miami Dolphins and have a few mediocre seasons. He wasn't terrible, but obviously didn't have a ton of success. But there was an opportunity for them to get Drew Brees in free
Hmm.
agency. And Drew Brees, they were all set to sign him. Saban thought they were going to get him, and then he fails the physical. And Drew Brees ends up going to the Saints. And, the rest is history there with the Saints. He goes on and wins the Super Bowl, with the Saints, New Orleans following Katrina, one of the great stories. and he ends up having a Hall of Fame career, an unbelievable player, one of the great quarterbacks of all time. But that left Nick Saban without a quarterback, and he had another, mediocre season, and he would leave the NFL and go to Alabama. So you just wonder, man, how one little thing, if Breeze passes that physical, was obviously it was good enough for the Saints to sign him, so it couldn't have been that bad. But it was bad enough that the Dolphins didn't sign him. But if the Dolphins had signed Drew Brees, you think of how much that could have changed football, not just the NFL, but college football. I mean, Nick
No,
Saban wouldn't have gone to Alabama.
no question. I want to say the Dolphins ended up signing Dante Culpepper instead,
Yeah, that's right.
right?
Yes.
And you're right. So another chain reaction. What if instead of Nick Saban then happening, what if Rich Rod agrees to the Alabama job? Because he initially did and then backed out of it. And yeah, so many what if scenarios. Like, because if Drew Brees is with the Dolphins, like Nick Saban might still be in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
it is just wild to think about sometimes.
Yeah. Those just a little thing can change the course of history. It's wild. But
Well,
yeah,
think
that
about well, Dan, one
go
more.
ahead.
Think about this one. If Michigan State doesn't win this game and then they go, because this year they finished 6-6, didn't go to a bowl game. They don't win this game. They're at best 5-7. So 3 in 4 seasons, he's gone 0-3 in bowl games at Michigan State and then had a losing record year four. Right? So
Yeah.
like, he could hang his hat. He can hang your hat on a couple Michigan wins and then winning this game. But other than that, nowadays, if that happens in college football, you don't have a job. Nobody gets 5 years anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, a lot of what ifs, a lot of interesting things. And I'm just watching this stuff. It's like it's kind of jarring seeing Nick Saban in the green and white of Michigan State because it just doesn't pop in your mind when you think of Nick Saban. You think Alabama, you think LSU, maybe a little bit of the Dolphins in the NFL career, but really Alabama is what you think of when you think about Nick Saban, and to see him in the green and white, man, it's wild.
I remember delusional Michigan State fans, and I was kind of one of them at the time when he left, because Bobby Williams took over as the interim head coach for the Citrus Bowl, and then the next couple seasons before he got let go. Like there was just a thought that no, like, Michigan State's going to keep it going now. Like they've got this good thing going, but that obviously didn't happen, and Nick Saban was a lot better than everybody thought. And I mean, if I you would like to think if Michigan State, the people in charge that had the say, could do it all over again, they wouldn't have let him go into LSU.
Yeah.
And there, I think, I don't know for sure. You hear the rumors. There's a lot of reasons for it. Like LSU is a special place, and when you're in Louisiana, you don't have to compete with, a national caliber program down the road from you. Ann
Yeah.
Arbor and South Bend. In Columbus, that's all right there.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. You don't have to compete with that in the state of Louisiana. So I mean. Yeah, there's so a lot of drama.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that will wrap it up for us, Brian. Just say you have any final thoughts on this game?
No, again, I mean, I think we're rolling with some good games, and the next one's going to be a big one. And I want to have you announce that to everybody. It's going to go a little bit of a different route, right? Because it
Yeah.
won't be the local flavor. But again, for me, I'm a little bit older than you. This was still, I remember where I was when this game took place, and I love those.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the next game we're going to do next week is the 1991 Miami Florida State game, and what everybody will remember from this game is wide right. It's the first of the wide right series. Um, Florida State, obviously, this was a number one versus number two matchup. It's late in the year too, which you know you don't often get. Regular season one versus two, especially late in the season like this. Just there was a tremendous amount of buildup, as you can imagine, and goes right down to the wire. Florida State, kind of got a chip shot field goal, and they miss it, and it goes wide right. And it's the crazy thing about it is you see Bobby Bowden, he thinks they made it. He's running down, and he's like, "What? What? We missed it." So it was that close. And obviously would determine so much that season. And it's interesting too because it was the 91 the game we went talked about last week was Michigan Notre Dame, and we mentioned how Michigan would played Florida State that year, and Florida State went up to Ann Arbor and kind of took it to Michigan a little bit, and Florida State looked, all of the number one team in the country. So, kind of a little bit of a throwback there to going back to last week, and kind of wrap up maybe a little bit of Florida State and kind of the '91 season. But it's definitely a game that we had marked down as a game we want to do for this show. So, really looking forward to doing that next week. Game for Brian, I'm Dan Murphy, and we'll see you next week.